Can you all hear me all right? Yes? Okay. Thanks, everybody, for having me today. As Lisa mentioned, I do spend my days in Washington, D.C., but please don't judge me by that. I spend all my time working with states, and that's really where I prefer to be. So I'm really glad to be here today to talk about some solutions, because I think we heard some really sobering data for the last 15 or 20 minutes, and the good news is that we can work on building it back up, as the treasurer said. Now is the time for us to be able to talk about solutions. So I'll do a little bit of stage setting, but for the most part, let's talk about how to fix this problem. As you heard this morning already, 1 out of every 3 households used to be at risk for a financially insecure retirement in the 1980s. That number has creeped up over the last several years to 1 out of every 2 households. And I like to put this in perspective because I am not the numbers person, unlike the treasurer. To me, what I see when I see this chart is someone who can't afford to pay for her prescription drugs, someone who can't keep the lights on, someone who can't afford to stay in their home and age in place. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal for the entire state. And one of the reasons is because almost half of all households have nothing saved for retirement. So we've spent the last 20 minutes talking about all the haves in the world. Let's talk about the have-nots. Let's talk about folks who really don't have a way to save for retirement, who don't have a pension, who don't have access to a 401k or other retirement plan at work. This one actually startles me a lot. This is the percentage of folks who have a way to save out of their regular paycheck at work. That number, if you can tell, the average hasn't changed over 40 years. So think about it, right? We've gone through a technological revolution. We have computers in our pockets. We have all these new financial tools available to us. And yet the same percentage of employers are offering their workers a way to save for retirement at work. Why is that? The picture for North Carolina, I know John's going to go into a little bit more detail on this, but we have looked, many research institutions have looked at how things stand across the country, and I think state data is the most important thing to look at, as specific as possible. The picture in North Carolina is pretty bleak. When you look regionally, it falls in the bottom quarter of the country in terms of ability to maintain standard of living in retirement. When you look at potential retirement income, retiree costs, and labor markets, North Carolina falls towards the bottom, unfortunately. And part of the reason that's true is because so many workers across the state don't have a way to save for retirement out of their regular paycheck. This is particularly important because people are 15 times more likely to save just by having access out of their regular paycheck. This breakdown is a little bit more specific. It's North Carolina, but specifically multicultural workers and not having access to a retirement plan at work, which is also, it's one of the big indicators of whether or not you have access. And I know these numbers are incredibly tiny, but this tells a huge tale. This breaks down the number of people who have a way to save for retirement by age, by gender, by employer size, and I think just to point out a couple, I often get the question, hey, AARP, why are you working on this? This doesn't impact your members. It's too late for your members to save. And although that's not true, when we look across the board, this impacts everyone. So if you look just North Carolinians from ages 55 to 64, only 44% of them, only 60% of them or so have access to a way to save for retirement. So that's 232,000 people that are likely our members who go to work every day, do the right thing, and don't have access to a retirement plan. So it's not just millennials, it's people across every age bracket. And it really, truly impacts employers by size, and I'm gonna leave that to John because I know he's gonna talk a lot about employers and why they do offer programs and why they don't. Here, the other question I get most often is, why can't people just go out on their own and open an IRA? Why do we need the state to step in here? And the answer is absolutely they can. We hope that they do. But the data doesn't bear that out. Only 5% of people will go out on their own and open their own retirement plan. Only 5% of people. So no matter how easy it is, no matter how low cost you may think it is, and we can debate that, the truth is that no one's gonna do it. But if they can do it out of their regular paycheck, if they can stay for retirement just out of their regular paycheck and opt in, they're 15 times more likely. If we make that access opt out, so on day one, I show up to work at a new job and I'm automatically in the retirement plan unless I say no, they're 20 times more likely to save for retirement. And that has a huge impact on the budget. We spent some time this morning talking about budgets, and I think it's really important to put some numbers to what this means here. So the state of North Carolina could save $127 million by helping people save their own money for retirement between now and 2032. Those are real dollars that can be used for other things, to shore up other holes, or to make sure that we're helping our population age in place or be able to live self-sufficiently as they age. So we've talked a little bit about these three pieces, and I want to make sure we pick up a little bit of time so John has enough time to go through his piece. These are the important functions to us when we look across behavioral economics, which is a relatively new field. What we know is that in order to make a program work, it needs to have automatic enrollment. Everybody needs to have access to a way to save out of their paycheck, but it needs to be voluntary. And so we know that employees are in the driver's seat. They need to decide how much they want to put away, if they want to put away anything at all, and where they want to put their money. And it has to be portable. In this new work environment, we have to be able to ensure that if you, as a millennial, go to work 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different employers in your lifetime, this can go with you. This is one way that states have chosen to start considering options. There are multiple other options, so please don't take this as gospel. But one way that states have thought to make this easier on small businesses, which really is the goal, they're busy keeping their doors open, they don't have an HR department, is the employer says, okay, I'm ready to offer a retirement plan. I know I want to do this. I think it'll make me more competitive, et cetera. You can always, as an employer, open up whatever retirement plan you want, a simple, a SEP, whatever it is, you can open up your own retirement plan. But if you are busy keeping your doors open, if you're a florist or you're a farmer and you just don't know where to start, you don't have the time or the money or the expertise, you can use a state program, which looks a lot like some of the programs we heard about this morning, whether it's the 529 plan or deferred compensation. Essentially, it's a public-private partnership where the state bids out the work to the private sector, and the state plays the role of aggregator or matchmaker. So they pull together all these small businesses and their employees, and they get a better deal because they're getting the warehouse model. The state's negotiating with the providers, and the providers get a great deal, right? Because we're bringing to them a whole bunch of new employees who've probably never saved for retirement before, and we're giving them in one big bundle rather than the provider having to knock down Main Street doors and saying, do you want a retirement plan? Do you want a retirement plan? No, they don't have to do that in this scenario. And employers really get the best part of the deal because all they're responsible for is payroll deduction and giving a packet of information. So that's part of the reason why this movement has grown so quickly. In 2013, this is what the world looked like. Only a couple of states were considering this issue, although I will say in 2008, actually, both candidates for president, both Obama and McCain, supported a federal version of this legislation. It's highly bipartisan. It just didn't get any traction on the federal level, which is why we're concentrating on the state level. This is what the world looks like today. These are not all states that have programs, but they are all states that are engaging in the same discussion we're engaging in today. So 10 states are getting programs up and running, and you will hear a lot more about these programs and where we stand today with those. But I just want to say, what really excites me about this is there are so few policies out there where we see actual results, tangible results, that we can put numbers to, that has a positive daily impact on the lives of folks who live in our state. And this is one of those positive results-oriented solutions, and you're gonna hear a lot about that today. Just a little bit more data and national context. Again, you're gonna hear about this today, but this is a highly bipartisan issue, right? For ARP, our perspective is, look, we are very used to having to go into budget negotiations. And we say, where's your funding for adult protective services? Where's your funding for all these other priorities? And one of the questions we often get is, well, what are you bringing to the table? Where are you going to be on revenue? And the thing is that this is a revenue builder across the state, because if people save their own money for retirement, the state is going to spend significantly less in social safety net spending. And that's one of the reasons why this is so bipartisan across the country. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to tell you a lot more about small businesses and why they are in our offering.
So I want to say thank you to AARP for having me here, and it's great. And I also want to say that I was actually heartened by, he's not here anymore, but by Treasurer Falwell's remarks as a former state employee and vested participant in the pension plan. I'm actually glad to hear that he is committed to keeping promises. So I'm going to be, I think Sarah ended on a more positive note in terms of, thinking about policy solutions that are out there. I'm going to sort of try and bring you back down, make you feel bad. So let's see, I got to look for the page down. Here we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, or I'm going to focus on barriers to retirement savings. I am going to provide some numbers around North Carolina, but I'm also going to largely focus on two surveys we did a couple of years ago, one on small business owners and the other on workers at small to mid-sized businesses. Because at Pew, we really want to understand what are the barriers to retirement savings, because we don't think you can get to a solution until you really understand what's holding people back, whether that's what's holding or keeping employers from offering retirement benefits, or what's holding workers back from participating in a retirement plan. So that'll be sort of the bulk of my remarks. And just sort of, I think Sarah did a great job setting the stage here, but, having worked in the retirement field for far too long, we always use the metaphor of the three-legged stool with Social Security, employer-provided retirement plans, and personal savings or work as sort of being the basis for retirement security in this country. Unfortunately, that stool is, if not broken, pretty shaky. Obviously, Social Security is facing some financing challenges in the very near future. I'll be talking a little bit about employer-provided retirement plans in a second. But then, people aren't saving on their own. And a lot of people have expectations. Well, my retirement plan is I'll work as long as I possibly can. But we do know from the data that people often retire much earlier than they had planned to, largely because of health reasons, but also because they have to leave a job to take care of a loved one, or just involuntary layoffs. So I think this conversation feeds into a broader issue of retirement security. So just focusing on that one leg of the stool, that is employer-provided retirement plans for workers in the private sector, just a few data points that are specific to North Carolina. There are approximately about 1.6 million workers in the state who don't have access to a retirement plan at their workplace. And this is really sort of the critical issue, because we know that people accumulate retirement savings through the workplace. Less than 15% of people save for retirement outside of a workplace plan. So it's really the main vehicle. And I think you'll hear a little bit later some of the behavioral reasons why people don't save on their own. But 1.6 million across the state, largely split on a gender basis. Just some additional, and I'm not going to go through all this data, but just really to give you a taste, as Sarah mentioned, we do see communities of color, Latinos, having less access than their population numbers would warrant. So Latinos in particular are challenged in trying to have access to a retirement plan. And then when we sort of look at the employer side, I'm just going to mention employer size today, but there's also a lot of variation across different industries. But largely, we see small employers or workers at small employers, small to mid-sized employers, not having access to retirement plans. So the reason we conducted these surveys was to really understand why this is the case. And so I'll first talk about our employer survey. And one of the questions we wanted to understand is, how do retirement benefits fit within the broad suite of employee benefits? And I don't know if you can really see it, so I'll just sort of talk. Paid time off, 86% of employers in our survey said they offered paid time off, 61% offered health insurance. Retirement came in third at about 53%. And this makes sense. We had conducted focus groups with employers around the country, and they said, you really have to have paid time off. You really have to be thinking about health insurance, because those are immediate needs for our employees. Retirement is sort of a little bit farther off in terms of people's time span. So it's not surprising it's not offered as much. Now, we wanted to understand, what's the probability of offering a retirement plan depending on the type of employer you are. And so in this slide, along the x-axis at the bottom, it's the size of the employer in terms of the number of employees. And we have a similar graph showing the age of the business as well. And it's a similar story. When you're very small, when you're starting out, the odds are very, very low that you're going to have a retirement plan. But as you grow, as you add more employees, the probability of offering a plan goes up. But at a certain point, it plateaus. Roughly around 75 to 100 workers, a business is no more likely to offer a plan than if they had 200 workers. So there's something holding them back. Now, it might be in their particular industry or competitive market. Retirement benefits aren't a thing, so they don't need to offer it, and they've been growing and have been successful. Or there might be other reasons. But we do see sort of initial growth, after startup during this middle phase, and then at some point it levels off. Now, why do employers offer a retirement plan? Now, we gave a number of reasons to employers in our survey, from helping employees to save for retirement, as a tool for attracting workers, a positive impact on performance, or tax advantages either for management or for the workers. And employers could check any number of boxes. That's the gold bars that you see here. But then we said, what's the main reason why you offer a retirement plan? And those are the blue bars. And so at 48%, nearly half said it helps employees save for retirement. Only 31% said it's a tool for attracting and keeping workers. And this is an important point here, because this came out in our focus groups. A lot of these business owners, they see their workers every day, and they get to know their workers. And they have a deep concern just for the broad welfare of their workers, but in particular the financial security aspects. And they say, we know what our workers should be doing, and we want to offer retirement benefits if we can, because we want them to be financially secure. So this sort of altruistic approach is really critical to a lot of small to mid-sized business owners. Now, as I mentioned, we surveyed employers who do not offer retirement benefits, and we said, what's the main reason you don't offer a plan to your workers? And in the sort of the dark blue on the right, 37% said it's too expensive to set up a retirement plan. Another 22% said we don't have the organizational bandwidth to administer a plan. A distant third at 17%, that's sort of that light blue, and I apologize for the font, 17% said employees are not interested, so there's no demand for it. So the bottom line is it's a cost issue, and it's also an administrative bandwidth issue that's holding back a lot of employers from offering retirement benefits. And then I think finally, in terms of the employer side, what would motivate a business to offer a plan if they're not already doing so? Most said an increase in business profits, and the second biggest reason was increased business tax credits. There is a federal tax credit for startup costs, but it's relatively small. And a lot of people don't know about it, quite frankly. But basically, the more financial stability, going back to that sort of curve, that dotted line curve, as firms become more stable and they feel they can handle it, they're more likely to offer a retirement plan. But they sort of have to get to that point that they feel they can handle it. Okay, so now we want to shift to the worker side of the equation. What are the barriers to saving on that side? And I'll go through this relatively quickly because I think you've already heard some of this. So this is looking at access and participation in a plan. And this breaks it out. Hopefully you can read it at the bottom between part-time workers and full-time workers. Part-time workers are much less likely to have access to a plan, and at 60% don't have access as compared to full-time workers at 28%. That's the gold bars that you see there. So your labor force status matters a great deal as to whether you have access to a retirement plan. We've already mentioned racial and ethnic differences. I gave you the North Carolina numbers. Sarah had mentioned, I think, some national numbers. This is from our survey as well. Latinos are overrepresented by far in terms of lack of access to a retirement plan. And then by firm size. Again, this is something I mentioned with the North Carolina numbers. It's been borne out by the national data. Workers at small to mid-size firms, but particularly firms between 5 and 24 employees, are much less likely to have access to a retirement plan. The participation numbers are, once you do have access to a plan, the participation numbers are somewhat similar, but it's really a story about access. And then there's gender differences. I think the one thing on the right-hand side, it's the two bars there are full-time workers, male versus female, very similar. Roughly about 30% don't participate at the full-time level. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. But on the left-hand side are part-time workers. And what's interesting here is 53% of part-time women participate in a retirement plan, as opposed to 28% of part-time men. We know that women are much more likely to work in part-time jobs. And I don't really know what the theory is, but I suspect that because they're overrepresented in part-time work, they're probably bringing in extra income into a dual-income household. I think there's a sense that they need to participate in a retirement plan, even if they are part-time. But this is one of the interesting research questions we'd love to get into. And here's a slide. It's going to be a challenge to look at it, but it brings home a point about being in a retirement plan that has benefits beyond the obvious. So we asked a lot of questions in the survey about retirement planning. And here we asked people, what sources did you use in trying to estimate what you need to save for retirement? And I'll quickly read some of these. So online tools or calculators, this is at the top. A financial professional, I guesstimated, so a back of the envelope calculation, an automated statement from a financial provider, family members or friends, the HR department at your job, and then a work colleague or a manager. And we divided this into those who have access to a retirement plan and those who don't have access to a retirement plan. So I'll just want to mention two results here. So if you have access to a retirement plan, you are much more likely to use an online tool or calculator to estimate what you need to save for retirement. If you don't have access to a retirement plan, you are much more likely to have guesstimated. And I think the importance here is sort of the multiplier effect of having access to a retirement plan, that workers not only have an opportunity to save, but they have greater tools at their disposal, more information and education to plan for retirement and sort of increase their savings, not just having access to a plan, not just participating, but sort of saving the right amount so they'll be more financially secure in retirement. I think that's an important aspect of this that sometimes gets lost.